Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing? Good morning. It's a good day. Someone said to me this morning, if you can get up and at the end of the day, when you're about to go to bed, count only 10 disappointments, it's been a good day. Let me start by thanking everybody who took the time to be here. I know for a lot of you, you've traveled from the different corners of our country to join us and to share with us the significant moment in our movement and in our country's future. I know you made this journey because you believe that we can have a different South Africa. It was just yesterday when a friend of mine, Ntate Sidiri, gave me a call and shared a very touching experience about his journey to a Middle Eastern country. I think it was December last year, and he said, Moy, you won't believe that as I was about to get off the taxi at the airport, and I gave the cab driver a tip, he looked at me and said, sir, in a very gentle way, I appreciate the tip, but I need to give it back to you because our country has a vision of being the leading tourist destination in 2036. And so I'd like to give you back this money and encourage you to come back again because I have a part to play in the vision of this country. I believe that everybody who's here today in this venue and those watching at home believe the same, feel the same way, that we all have a part to play in our country's future. We have every reason, by the way, to be excited because today we're going to hear about a very solid plan from committed, capable, and competent men and women who are dedicated to serving our country. I am Wibone Mankala Molotlanye, but please call me Moy, because as you can see, I'm a very pretty young lady. And I have the privilege of being your host today and keep the conversation flowing, but also keep the time very tight, much tighter than the belt around my waist, okay? So help me with that one. And just the two house rules from our side. Number one is that on my right, it is a long walk to freedom, but there are bathrooms there. And please feel free, be welcome, and let's kindly switch off our phones or just put them on vibrate. And I'm really excited to get into this part of our program. That is to welcome Mr. Roger Jardine, Mr. Murphy Morobe, Ms. Nicole Fritz, and Mr. Mark Haywood onto the stage. Please, let's give them a warm welcome. Now, before we begin, I'd just like to give you a brief introduction into who Mr. Roger Jardine is. Just at the age of 29, Mr. Jardine became the Director General of South Africa's Department of Arts, Culture, Science and Technology, and this was during Tata Madiba's tenure as President. He then went on to serve in different roles as an executive leader in the business industry. Roger formerly served as the chairperson of the First Rand before raising his hand to connect with committed South Africans in forming a movement called Change Starts Now. Now, the most exciting part for me about Roger's resume is that he is a dedicated husband, a father to 2 girls, and a fantastic cook. But I think that's a room I'm here to test that. Roger, please come to stage and give us a sense of what a tangible picture of 2024 looks like. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Roger Jardine.
Great, well, good morning, and thank you for your time, for taking time to be with us this morning. Yesterday was the start of the school year. For many South Africans heading back to work, and for even more continuing that search for employment. But Happy New Year to everyone, and all the best for 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow South Africans, we are here this morning at the Women's Jail at Constitution Hill. This landmark is a powerful symbol of change. It's a powerful symbol of change, and it's so appropriate in this environment where change is on all of our minds. It was built in 1910, and this women's jail has long been a mark of oppression for the women who are housed here and for a country that could not protect them. Many of the women were arrested simply for trying to make a living, brewing beer illegally under harsh and exclusionary economic conditions. When the women of South Africa organized a women's march on the 9th of August 1958 against the pass laws, many of them were arrested and incarcerated here at the women's jail. This place has a special resonance for me because my grandmother was a trade union leader in the 1950s. She marched on Marshall Square in Johannesburg. She was brutally beaten up. It was a turning point in our family's history and our family's commitment to fighting for justice. And it is her journey and the journey of the women who were held in this space that should provide us with the energy and the fuel and the commitment to continue working for change. This place is a hallmark of that indomitable spirit to dare to create a different life than the one we currently live. It's a spirit that we embrace at Change Starts Now. I stand here today at this moment of great significance in the life of our young democracy to share with you our thoughts, analysis, and ideas for moving South Africa onto a path of hope. We must move onto a path of hope. I think for all of us around our dinner tables and our WhatsApp groups, we tend to focus on the fear, but we're not going to peddle in fear. Let's focus on hope. A hope which once burned so fiercely in our collective spirit and imagination, and a hope that inspired the whole world. But we must agree, it's a hope that has waned to levels where it is becoming very rare to hear South Africans, our families, our friends, our neighbors, speak of this. But while it has waned, I know that this hope has not been extinguished. And I say nothing new to any South African today who experiences today's lived reality. And when I say that the bright flare of that hope that has dimmed to all but a flicker, I also say, as I've just said, although it has dimmed, it has not been extinguished. So today I stand before you with a vision of a South Africa that works, a South Africa that cares, and a South Africa where positive change starts now. Imagine a South Africa that works. I don't know about you, but I sometimes close my eyes, and perhaps we all should close our eyes and picture, because we get so drawn into the morass that we are in. But let's lift our heads and let's picture a South Africa where our politics is trained on collaboration and solution, not empty promises. Envision a state that consistently and professionally delivers essential services to every citizen. Picture a nation where dignity is not a privilege, and we all know this dignity issue that has just eroded over the last many years. But picture a nation where dignity is not a privilege, but a fundamental right, where jobs and livelihoods bring prosperity to all. Imagine a South Africa where no one goes to bed hungry, where care, social security, and solidarity are the cornerstones of our society. We are in this together. Picture clean water flowing from every tap, lights that illuminate our streets 24/7, and public spaces where everyone feels safe, especially women and children. Just imagine. This South Africa is not an unattainable dream. It is within our grasp. We have the resources. We have the constitution. We have the laws. We have the policies. What we do not have, what we lack, is decisive servant leadership. And we know that the state is broken. Our country is broken. And the situation is worsening every day. We do not need studies and academics and charts and information that we read somewhere to tell us this. This is the lived experience of South Africans today. We have found in our engagements that the majority of South Africans no longer believe in the ANC, a party with a heroic past, but with a very dismal present. There's lots of speculation on where the ANC will end up post-election. It may receive as little as 40% of the vote in the upcoming elections. The message that we are getting consistently as we talk to people across this country is that the ANC is a party that belongs in the past. The ANC is a party that belongs in the past. What we have found is that the majority of people across all areas in our countries share this view. And only a third of South Africans actually trust this party to govern. The time for change has come. And so as we approach this critical moment in 2024, we stand at a precipice. It's both an opportunity and a danger. Now is the best chance we have to vote the ANC out of power. The question we must ask ourselves is, who will replace the party that belongs to the past? What does the future look like? The answer is clear. Together, all South Africans who want a way out of this mess will shape the future. Like-minded South Africans will. We will. We know the problems and we know the solutions. South Africa has the skills. We have the experts. We have the will to do great things as South Africans. Our pledge to you, the people of South Africa, is to fix the economy and create more jobs, to make our country a safer place to live in, to provide a safety net for those without income security, to ensure decent basic services such as health, education, water, power, and sanitation. We pledge to work to build a government that works for the people. And our plan is straightforward. We will collaborate with business and other partners to create new jobs, especially for the youth. We will fix broken public and economic infrastructure, including Eskom, Transnet, and the water crisis that seems to never end. We will end corruption in public institutions, particularly in police and prisons. And we will ensure accountability and protect constitutional rights. comprehensive social security solutions. This is not something that is a gift from a political party to the people of this country. It is enshrined in the Constitution. And so it is simply a lie that these will disappear if the government changes. We will encourage innovation, imagination, and creativity in solving South Africa's problems, restoring dignity, and building unity and national pride. Our politics and philosophy are rooted in standing for and with the people of South Africa. Change Starts Now is uniquely positioned to lead a collaborative effort across all sectors: political parties, civil society, workers, women, youth, and the private and public sectors. We bring game-changing ideas, exemplary leadership, and a commitment to inclusivity. Our leadership has the skills and experience needed to fix our state, with a deep understanding of the struggles and triumphs in building a democratic country. We need to come together to vote for change. Eskom affects our daily lives, and you must agree with me, it has become the poster child for why we need change now. How many times have we as South Africans been told that load shedding will end soon? I don't need to remind anyone that this crisis, a crisis invented by the ANC, has haunted our country and our economy and constrained our ability to create much needed jobs for 17 years. In June of 2023, you may recall, the so-called Minister of Electricity admitted in a press interview that one stage of load shedding costs 300 billion rand, and load shedding itself has caused more than 600,000 permanent job losses and counting. 2 mornings ago, I went to the taxi rank in Alex and spoke to a lot of people about their lived experiences. And the people of this country are suffering without jobs, and Eskom is being played around with like a toy. And these jobs won't automatically come back. And the ANC has done permanent damage to our country and our economy, and it will require drastic and urgent action to reverse. It has been 9 years since Mr. Ramaphosa, then Deputy President under Jacob Zuma, first promised South Africans that load shedding would be a thing of the past in 18 to 24 months. That was 9 years ago. In 2023, the Secretary General of the ANC again told South Africans that load shedding will be a thing of the past by the end of 2023. I tried to collect all these false promises and to lay them out for you here today, to expose the lies on these issues, but we would be here the whole day. We can all count. My message to the President, Mr. President, we can all count. And we see you. And it is very clear for all who can see that the emperor has no clothes. The experts will tell us, and take those lies against what the experts are telling us, that we can realistically end load shedding in 3 to 4 years through a relentless focus on a few key variables. Here they are. We must increase rooftop solar and storage for households, factories and businesses. We must reduce the rate of preventable breakdowns at power stations and stabilize energy production. We must ensure the public and private sector works together to enable speedy grid connections for new commercial scale energy installations. We must all work together to improve the efficiency of energy usage. We must intensify public-private partnerships and get those models going to add additional energy generation capacity and skills. And as a country, we urgently need to invest in transmission infrastructure, which will run into billions of rand, but will position the economy for long-term growth and job creation. If we do all of these things, working together, we can realistically end load shedding. But here's the question. Can we really trust this government with another 5 years in office when they have demonstrated zero ability or desire to focus on these simple required steps to put us out of our misery? It is very clear. If things stay as they are, if the current government remains in power, rather than ending load shedding in 3 or 4 years, we will likely suffer under this crisis for a further 10 years or perhaps forever. There is no management ability in the state on this issue. And just think of this. The entire matric class of 2023 have only ever known load shedding throughout their school careers. The learners picking up their results, that has been their school experience. Yesterday, I visited a primary school in Sharpeville, and I want to pay tribute to the teachers who, under very difficult circumstances, are very passionate and committed. That school has been without electricity for 3 years, and there is no plan to reconnect them to the grid. We must choose change so that those learners, especially the grade 1s who started school yesterday, are not also condemned to a similar experience through their entire school careers. We must end this crisis of ineptitude, and we must ignite our political will to choose change. The experts also tell us that if only these measures are implemented that I just mentioned, and if we bear in mind the current government's track record, there's nothing to suggest that this will be moving forward. And if those are implemented with the right management team, and if it is done alongside resolving our logistics problems, we all read about Transnet and the ports and all of those things. But if we put all of those measures in place and resolve them alongside the logistics bottlenecks in our port and freight system, South Africa could see an improvement in confidence and investment, and it may lift real GDP growth to above 2.5% before we do all the other things that we need to do. We need to get South Africa on the right track. This 2.5% would more than double our current growth rate of a devastatingly lower rate of below 1% per annum. A rate so low, it is causing South Africa and South Africans to become poorer and poorer each year in real terms. Currently, we are all following the war in the Middle East and the crisis in the Red Sea. We have now seen 85% of all large container vessels that typically pass through the Suez Canal, they're being rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope. Another missed opportunity for our major port cities to play their part in supporting global trade in a time of need, to increase government revenue through public-private partnership, and to remake South Africa as a desirable and competitive destination for trade and investment. We need to be realistic and turn these crises into economic tailwinds. And what is it really about at the end of the day? It's about opportunity for all of our people. These actions would start to resolve some of our country's massive poverty, unemployment, and government debt problems. And this would be before, as I've mentioned before we roll out a massive infrastructure investment program and other measures to stimulate our economic growth and boost job opportunities for our people. Everyone knows the number one issue facing South Africa is jobs, jobs, jobs. We need to do everything possible to create an environment for employment for our people. And so our choice in this election is clear. We can choose more of this misery, or we can choose change with the promise of tightly managing our country's return to a load-shedding free society. Can you imagine? Your vote, our votes, will be for a government that is committed to serving the interests of all South Africans. In 2024, we have the power to change this narrative. We must vote for change. It is time to put an end to the endemic corruption and elect leaders who prioritize the needs of the people over self-interest. The supreme constitutional power of the people to choose a new leader and government is about to be exercised in this most historic of elections. It is historic because for the first time in the democratic order, we believe that the choice will be made through the consensus of many in a multi-party system, instead of having to meekly accept the choice of a wayward, fractious, and frankly untrustworthy single party. Last Saturday in Mbombela, the governing party conducted its annual ritual to mark another year of its storied and long history. One could not help but notice the frayed messages and the forced camaraderie, the tired platitudes that sought to reassure each other that all is well, and the mass consumption of the Kool-Aid that imbued the false belief in an exceptional performance that we all know is anything but exceptional. If I could speak frankly to President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa today, this is what I would like to say to him. I listened carefully to your address on the occasion of the January 8th celebrations of the ANC. My disappointment could not have been more profound as you read a statement crafted by a deceitful governing party. I believe I share this sentiment with millions of South Africans at home and abroad. But we know the people are not easily fooled. They were certainly not fooled by your breezy recitations of the gains of South Africans courtesy of your government. Your commentary was shameless and displayed a stunning lack of self-awareness of the universal decline across every economic and social metric. Your address, Mr. President, I'm sad to say, was akin to a desperate salesman making a despairing and outlandish pitch to peddle a similar but lousier product to a dubious and frustrated consumer. In your speech, you said that we must separate those who are able to govern this country from those who can't. I agree with you. And here is a sliver of reason, of the many reasons why your party and your government belongs to the past. Schools have just opened. Matrics are getting the results. Students will return to university in a few weeks' time. Here is some of the reasons why you are not fit to govern. As of 2021, 81% of grade 4 learners cannot read for meaning. We do worse than Kenya or Tanzania on international learning assessments. These are countries that are much poorer than South Africa. By the age of 18, experts estimate the average South African learner has received only 5.1 years of actual learning, even though they have spent almost double that time actually attending school. In the poorest 80% of schools, learners are on average 2.5 years behind the curriculum by the end of grade 3. In other words, they've only learned half the grade 1 curriculum in 3 years. Only 41% of grade 6 maths teachers in SA were found by an international test to have good proficiency in mathematics. We compare this to 87% in Zimbabwe and 95% in Kenya. But it is possible to turn this around. Fundamental reform can produce noticeable improvements in learners' performance within a very short period, 2 to 3 years, with a focus. And there are countries that have done it. Let's aim to get our learners to read for meaning. Let's ensure that our teachers are trained properly and incentivized properly to perform. Let's work hard to outperform in international benchmark tests where we perform worse than our peers. With clear targets and objectives, and with the right people and the right policies, we can achieve incredible things. And for the sake of our children, think of the grade 1s yesterday. We must choose change. And our president needs to come out of hiding. Everyone talks about it. We have a president that hides. He is the absent father of this nation. He has not given a proper press conference befitting a leader of a country. He has told us many times that his party is more important than we the people, and it shows. And you see, you have everything to fear, because the masses of our people see the ANC today for what it is, a shadow of what it once was. I think it's time, Mr. President, to come out and debate the state of the nation on a platform for all to see, not just carefully curated, adoring crowds. And I'm quite certain, Mr. President, that you are acutely aware of carrying the unwanted burden of being a leader of a failed government, which has depressingly only gotten worse since your return to political office. You must agree with me. The party of selfless struggle has become the party of self-enrichment. And this has happened on your watch. And so I extend an invitation to you for a debate on our national condition and approaches to the crisis facing South Africa. Such a dialogue will definitely benefit all South Africans. And so I stand here today with a deep sense of purpose and commitment to something new. A South Africa that builds, that brings hope, solidarity, and progress. I ask you to join us in building an opposition strong enough to win the 2024 elections and to replace the current government. Our coalition must believe in our constitution and peaceful political action. We can show ourselves that change is possible. And coalitions must not be about sharing the spoils, about who gets what position. Coalitions are about sharing a vision for society and a program of policies and actions to improve the lives of our people. We must change our politics in order to change our country. And when we say change our politics, we mean end corruption, so that load shedding must end. Tenders for friends must end, so that when water and other services are provided, these contracts do not go to friends who have no clue about the task. When we say change our politics, we mean change our government. We will launch our manifesto to govern in the week of 19 February. But today we are sharing our vision for our society and continue to talk to South Africans from all walks of life. Last week in Soweto, I spoke to a person on a SASSA grant. He tells me he needs to renew his grant every 6 months. And so when that time comes, he wakes up at 4 a.m., he has an illness. They only see 80 patients a day. It sometimes takes him more than 5 days to get to the doctor. It does not have to be this way. We aim to stop the disease that has plagued our nation and steer South Africa towards a future. We have to stop this disease and steer South Africa to a future where the unemployed can find jobs, where the poor can escape their circumstances, where young people envision a prosperous future, where investors are drawn to our nation, where our firms expand, creating prosperity and jobs. Change starts now. South Africans, we have arrived at a fork in the road to our future. We can choose to remain mired and stuck in a ditch, and we can be stuck in this ditch after trying to evade a series of potholes that was once our paved path, or we can choose the other path, the on-ramp. Picture the sign, the change lane. Let's all get into the change lane. This is the highway to the South Africa of our dreams, the South Africa that we want, the South Africa that we deserve. In conclusion, as a fellow citizen, because you see, we're all citizens. Sometimes we are just seen as voters. We are more than just voters. We are citizens. And our citizenry is active before and after an election. And so as a fellow citizen who believes in the potential of South Africa and its people, let's walk this journey together and be the change that we want to see. Together, let's build a South Africa that works and cares for all of its people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raja. Sure. This is why I'm here, and this is what we believe in. Our visit to Sharpeville yesterday was so emotional and so touching. Again, because of the teachers that were there, and Roger, that you allowed to be so honest with you and created the space where they could be vulnerable and tell you the challenges that they're going through. But I also won't forget Principal Mkwanazi, who said to you, well, I guess I said to her, Mama, you don't have electricity, you don't get funding on time, and you consistently get break-ins, and it's just crime all year round. Why do you want to continue doing this? And she looked at me and said, for the very same reasons that I don't get funding on time, I don't get electricity, and crime is there, how can I not do something about it? And so it really is that, Roger. How can we not do something about our country? I'd really like to open up the floor. And before that, before the question and answer session, Roger, I'd like to get a sense from you. You know, it could have been easy for you to leave, book a flight and get out of here and say, this place is a mess. But you decided to roll up your sleeves. And I'm really keen on hearing on a personal level, what was that sense of conviction that got you to say, I want to do this and I don't have all the answers, but I can call a South African and partner with him and make a change?
Thanks, Moy. I think for all of us, we have our personal journeys. Mine, more recently, has been seeing that the solutions are not hard. These things can be done. And feeling very frustrated year in and year out. I just gave you the example in my speech of the power crisis. And there's a whole range of things. I mean, let's take public hospitals. In some places they work, but by and large, you can talk to any South African. 90% of South Africans use a public hospital. Now, where we are today, and this is something that I feel very strongly about. In 1994, you could feel the dignity of people when they voted for the first time. And we've all seen that slowly eroding. And I think unless we restore that dignity to all of the people of this country, and that's why we're taking much of our time, most of our time, because here's a basic truth. And let me speak to the business community where I come from. No sector of this country can separate itself from the other sector. We are all in this together. And that is why I think, I said that I'd like to be part of a conversation that reshapes the national political landscape. And that means that the choices that we have, we cannot only have those choices into the future. We have very, very poor segment of our society, the majority, large. And then we have very, very wealthy people in this country. And you cannot be comfortable in your wealth and go home and eat a great meal and sleep in a warm bed in winter and send your children to the best schools and not worry about what is happening to the rest of our society. So I've held a number of top corporate positions, and I worked in Sandton, but I'm not from Sandton. I was born in Rivoli and Eldorado Park. I don't need to read research reports about unemployment. I say to everyone, if you want to see the problem in this country, don't wait for Stats SA. Get in your car and go to a township on a weekday, and you'll see. You can't tell the difference between a weekday and a weekend. And so why I am so driven by what we are doing is we need the social solidarity. It's actually, if you want to give it a label, it's a social democracy where people work together for the common good. There's a role for a very strong and vibrant private sector, and the private sector knows that if the country's growing and people are employed and our communities are stable, their businesses will thrive. And I want to be part of that conversation, having straddled a community that I grew up in, a brief sojourn as a Director General, and a very long track record in the private sector, and to bring together expertise that can make sure that this generation of kids are not matriculating in 2036, also only ever knowing load shedding.
Sure. So, and with that said, thanks, Roger. I'd really like to open up to the floor. I'm so excited to see a diversity of people. And so I'm really keen on seeing your hand there, sir. So I can take 3 questions and then I'll open it up after the answer session. Could you just give me a sense of your name, where you come from, and your question, please, to anybody on the floor?
The place. Okay, thanks. Just to repeat, the name is Silas Hammonds. I'm from a township called Alexandra. I grew up there. I did my schooling there. I finished my matric in Alex. So Alexandra is one of the townships that I would say the oldest in the country. It is a township that has actually, became a birth of so many other townships that I could mention. Your Bramfisher, El Dorado, people come from Alex. Deep Slot recently, among some of the places that grew up in, people moved from Alex to those particular places. The Orange Farm people, they come from Alex. So basically in Alex, the conditions are really appealing. The young people in Alex are unemployed in the majority. Matriculants are without hope, among other things, as to where to from here when I finish my matric. We're having challenges, and at the same time, when COVID came on board, I saw so many families losing jobs in Alex. We are a typical place that you can really identify to say how COVID has impacted negatively on our people. So many families are without, the knowledge to say what's for a meal tomorrow. They do not know what to eat tomorrow. Nonetheless, what's for supper this evening? One of the things that actually I wanted to raise a question on is the issue of unemployment. As much as the majority of people that are unemployed in this country are young people, we are the largest population in the country as well. So a country such as South Africa with so many opportunities, for me, I see South Africa could have been a breadbasket for the entire continent. Reason being is that we've got so many harbors in this country. We could have been a mode of transport for Africa to produce so many goods and send it elsewhere in the world. So I remember there were so many efforts with the very government of the day that is running this country, where they were encouraging people to open businesses, SMEs. I've been in that space where I've worked with a lot of these SMEs as a CLO, community liaison officer. There was one project that I was part of. So I've seen the frustration of the very SMEs that are really trying to create jobs for our people. I would call it red tapes, because there are so many requirements for one to register a company. And those requirements require funding. For you to open a business, you pay money. For you to do your tax certificate, somebody has to do a registration for you, you gotta pay. For you to have a CIDB certification, you have to pay a particular amount of money in that process. The BE certificates, to mention, there's quite a package. By the time you get an application to do a tender or something, you still have to pop out money. And these companies, people register companies, they end up staying 3-4 years without even finding a single job for that matter. By the time they find a new tender in place and they have to tender for that, they are told that their documents have expired. So these type of frustrations are actually limiting vehicles that could have been a mode to change the conditions of our people, because if SMEs could be given a space where we have a one-stop center where you do all of this registration as a package, you pay a once-off fee. I think that could have been a solution for growth in this country. But I see those very poor people who are trying to create opportunities being milked, being frustrated, because imagine having spent close to 6,000-7,000 to register a company. You even print out your business cards and you do all sorts of things. So I just wanted to find out from Change Starts Now, how will it assist young people, one? Secondly, how will it assist the business people or people that want to venture into business in this country, especially SMEs, because I saw them as a vehicle that can create employment. But with all of those red tapes, you find a person has a registered company 4 years back, but today he says, I'm unemployed, I'm without a company, because he cannot afford even to sustain that company. So how will that assist us?
Sure, thank you, Abuti Silas. Thank you for that. Could I open for 2 more questions and then allow Mark to respond? Okay. Can I please take the lady just in front of Silas? Yes, please. Just give us.
Sorry, I'm from the media. Are we allowed to ask you? Oh, okay.
Yes, please.
It's Kenny Mapanga from SABC News. In Mr. Jardin's speech, we have heard some of the issues that you've highlighted as an issue. Appreciating the fact that you are a newly launched platform, if perhaps we could highlight immigration and crime and some of those issues, what exactly is Change stating on those issues that are going to come up in 2024 as major issues? What is your position? What are you telling South Africa that you are going to do differently to address this? Are you going to support open borders, or do you believe that we need to have stricter measures on our borders, on crime? How are you going to tackle policing in communities? Just give us a practical resolution or idea that you're presenting to South Africans in 2024 for these kind of issues that will most likely dominate the 2024 elections. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Kenny. And then I'll hand over to the gentleman on my left, third row.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Mishak Mulewat. I will refer to Roger as our beloved president. I'm more concerned about his own safety. He's dealing with thugs here. Those people of the ANC, they're a serious bunch of thugs. How are you going to protect yourself?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. So can I hand over to Mark just to deal with the first question and the second? I think the third will be more for Roger.
Just let me, a little bit of what Silas from Alexandra said. You know, Silas, I used to do a lot of work in Alexandra, 1990, 91, 92. I haven't spent a lot of time in Alex since then. But it strikes me that in those years there was huge hope and promise for Alex. Promises for houses, promises for jobs, promises for sanitation, promises to upgrade Schwettler, promises to upgrade the hostels of Alex, and none of that has happened. The last time I was in Alex, on the streets I saw rats as big as cats, just walking down the streets, and children in the streets, and parents who have to go to bed, you know this, fearing that the rats are going to bite the children, and the rats sometimes do bite the children. And yet Alex is, and so Alex has moved from being a symbol of one thing, the dark city so-called under apartheid, to a symbol of another thing, the inequality of modern South Africa. Sandton there, the richest square kilometer in Africa. Alex there, as poor and as squalid as anything you can find. What happened to the Alex Urban Renewal Project? Paul Mashatile, Panyaza Lesufi, Obed Bapela stole the money from the Alex Renewal Project. So that agenda remains critical, absolutely critical, that reform agenda. And Change Starts Now has identified the continuation of spatial inequality, spatial apartheid, lack of access to affordable, decent housing close to job opportunities. You yourself said, people left Alex to go to Diepsloot, people left Alex to go to Orange, people have emigrated from Alex all over the place to where they think that they can find jobs. And what I want to say on the jobs front is that, Change South Africa is looking very, very, very seriously at this jobs issue, because for the polling that we've done, the number one issue for every voter in this country, way and above other things, is jobs. There has to be a solution to the jobs crisis. In Europe about 70 years ago, after the war, and apartheid was like a war for us, they had a thing called the Marshall Plan, where they invested lots of money to rebuild hope across European countries. And we need something like that in South Africa. You can call it a Mandela Plan, you can call it a Musa Plan, as Thuli Madonsela calls it, but we need a jobs plan, and a very, very ambitious jobs plan. We need to expand things like the presidential employment stimulus that has been started and that has been limited. I would just finish by saying that I don't think that the jobs problem is without a solution. Because you just go out onto the streets. It's not that there's no jobs needed that need to be done in the country. There's jobs that need to be done on every corner, in every city, in every department, everywhere. But we haven't found ways to give jobs to people because we're stealing the money that could build the infrastructure, that could employ the people, that could put money in people's pockets, that could mean that they can then buy goods and consumer goods, that could then lead to the development of companies and industries and so on. That's the cycle that we have to break, and I hope that that is something that, as Roger Jardine said, 19th of February, we'll launch a concrete plan. You must look out for a serious plan on how we resolve this unemployment crisis.
Thanks, Mark. And with regards to Kenny's question, would you like to speak to it, or Roger? Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. So on my visit to Alex, by the way, 2 days ago, a young man, a security guard, on his way to work, got into a long conversation with him, precisely on this topic, and he raised it. So I think you correctly identify it as a big issue in our society. No sovereign state can possibly have porous borders. It's just not something to countenance. And so part of our manifesto and the way we approach this will deal with how do we deal with our borders, the documentation of people coming into this country, and the management of these clear tensions that have flared on the back of everyone having less and less food to put on the table. And in this world, and especially on our beloved continent, as Africans, we need to turn to each other, not on each other. And I think this situation has been allowed to play out in such a way where desperate communities are looking for the person closest to blame for their issues. And they're real issues. And they need to be dealt with very systematically. There are South Africans who live in other countries around the world. So migration and inward and outward flow of foreign nationals is not a new thing. How we manage it here from a legal point of view in terms of the management of our borders, and then economically in terms of the opportunities for our people so that no one feels threatened. And I think it's a very deep conversation that's on every South African's mind, and we see it playing out sometimes in horrific ways. We need to address this. It is, and there's a knock-on effect also, which we must bear in mind as South Africans. You know, when South African companies who employ South Africans and want to grow to employ more South Africans, part of that is to create demand for what we do here on the rest of the continent. So we're not an island. And you sometimes find that when there are these huge flare-ups of violence against foreign nationals, South African companies in other jurisdictions take a lot of pain. Okay, so, and that's why I keep saying we are in this together. But one thing I'm very clear of, we need to fix how we police and manage our borders and how people come in and out of South Africa. You know, people at border towns will tell you that our health systems are overrun because there's no proper planning, etc. Those are real lived realities of people on the ground. It's incumbent on us as a government and as a people to make sure that we are doing all the right things. And so to me, this issue is another indication of a failure of governance. And we have to fix that. So no open borders. We have to tighten our borders and make sure that our whole system is properly managed. And linked to that is we have to have a growing economy where South Africans feel included and not overlooked and not competing unnecessarily with others. Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Nicole. Fritz?
Can I just say, categorically, and as we say very clearly in the document before you today, the politics and the philosophy that we practice is one of the Constitution, right? And that speaks unequivocally to the importance of a politics of non-discrimination. That said, we understand that in our country today, with such the volumes, the extent of the insecurity and the relative insecurity, that opportunistic political actors, in order to kind of cover their own dismal performance, are going to look to inflame sentiment, to use scapegoats. And whilst, I mean, as Roger said, there is certainly no suggestion that we are going to be taking a position of open borders. We need to manage those borders very clearly. We are also very clearly against a kind of opportunistic, manipulative stoking of xenophobic sentiment, of turning people against each other. And one of the things that I would say is so many of us, are so rightly proud of what we saw last week at the International Court of Justice, where South Africa took that incredibly principled stance on behalf of the people of Gaza. And we look at the issue of migration. It's been weaponized around the world, right? In the United States by the likes of Trump. In the United Kingdom, we have a policy where the United Kingdom is insisting that asylum seekers be warehoused in Rwanda, in an African country. They're not talking about refugee applicants from Ukraine. They're talking about refugee applicants from the Middle East and Africa. How can we be a leader on the global stage and insist on fairness and equality for some of the most vulnerable and persecuted in the world if we ourselves are giving voice to and articulating immigration policies that evidence discrimination, where we seem to play to xenophobia in our politics when it is convenient for us, when we stoke those tensions? And I think our position is very clear. We understand the importance of policing and of enhancing our policing, but we are very much against this looking to kind of set segments of South African society against each other as a cover for the most dismal, devastating governance policies.
Thanks, Nicole. I'd like to open up the floor again. Is there any more questions? Okay, can I limit it again to 3 and then we'll take it from there? Can I start with you, ma'am, at the end? Yes. Do you mind just introducing yourself, please? Yeah. Go for it. I'm struggling to hear you. Please just repeat that, ma'am.
Testing. Okay, sorry. My name is Yamtana Kapa from News 24. You launched in Rivoli in December, early December. I've heard that you're going to launch the manifesto next month. Having launched in December up until now, yes, the calendars politically were just quiet, understandably, but there was a lull with Change Starts Now as well. Is the momentum still the same from you guys? And also, between now and December, what have you learned having started this organization? And I just want to find out, are you still as keen as you were when you announced?
All right, thank you. And then did I see hands? Oh, in this side. Is there any hands on this side? Okay. Can I take and then I'll take you? Is that okay, ma'am? Thanks. Yeah, please let's pass on the mic and then we'll come back if that's okay, ma'am. Please, thanks. All right. Okay, thank you. Sure.
Thank you very much. My name is Zianda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa.
Yes.
My question, undoubtedly, we know that this election is also about young people. What is Change Starts Now going to do about reaching out to the youth? And just to pick up on my colleague Siamtanda's question, you are very new, and we might have the election in May, which means you have plus minus 6 months to campaign. You're not in all corners of the country. How are you actually going to speak to all South Africans and not just pockets of Alex here and there? So how are you, what is your targeted approach looking like at this point? And then to pick up on the issue of being everywhere, I mean, what are you relying on as your draw card? Is it you, Roger, because of your struggle credentials? Why should people trust you? And also, why have you not been able to, work with other movements like Rise Mzansi, for an example, because you, to me, seem very similar in the offering that you have. Is this the politics of showmanship and that it's just about individuals? And how different are you actually to just being an NGO and a political party? So actually, can you just delineate that as well? Thank you.
Thanks, Yanda. And then last question for this round, please. Oh, you're covered. Thank you so much. All right, thank you. Can I take you, ma'am?
Sbatle from SABC News. So my question simply is about the various parties that have come together just to try and consolidate ahead the 2024 elections. Where does Change Starts Now actually stand or fit in that? Because we've seen some political parties here to Gandla, some are under the MPC. So where does Change Starts Now actually stand? I mean, amongst the two groups, if I could say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Can I open up to Ndade Murphy? Is that fine?
Which one?
A question by Zianda.
Okay.
Yes.
All of them.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Noting that there was one question from the last round that Roger will still need to deal with regarding safety.
Yeah. Thank you. I would speak to Me Kapha. Am I right? C-A-P-H-A. No H. Kapha. Okay. Yeah. Now you're asking an important question. You start when you start and when you can. And there's a context when you start. We were waiting for you to come back from holiday. I think you guys were all on holiday between when we launched in Rivoli and this week when all the mamas are back at school and taking kids to school. So everything is ramping up, a typical South African curve of life. But on our side, it was getting into the process of setting up the organization, setting up the systems, establishing the networks and the connections across the country. That's always going to be a process, and we have to then determine at what point we are going to ramp up at what level, because it all has to be scientific in what we do. I think you've sat here for the past couple of minutes and listened to the speech that Roger has just gone through. I'm sure you can consider that as part of the ramping up of our engagement in the political space in South Africa. There's a lot of content in that speech. I'm sure there'll be lots of issues that are going to be harvested in social media and various other platforms that speak to the primary issues that South Africans are concerned with. But of course, with the process of voter registration being factored in, we're going to get into that curve as everybody else ramps up. So we make the determination as what is important at what time, and we do hope that we'll be able to reach as many South Africans as possible. Now, of course, given time and space, we're not going to use a shotgun approach, but we're going to be quite targeted and focused. There is data that is at our disposal that helps us to decide how to target the various areas, because with an election, it's about voting. It's about getting to people in terms of getting those numbers that will enable your gauge to move in the right direction of affirming your position and your arrival in the political space. So that to me is not a concern. It's not really a lull. I think it was the point in time when the campaign was announced. We had to make sure that at least you go away to Christmas with a clear sense that another player has come onto the marketplace. And that was what Rivali was about, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Tete Murphy. And Roger, can I hand over that question to you about personal safety?
Yeah.
As you put your hand up to run this race.
No, thanks.
Maybe let me speak to that one.
Sure.
Okay.
I think the issue of personal safety is an issue for all South Africans. You don't have to be Roger Jardine as a politician. You have to be a worker waking up at 4 a.m. in Alexander, going to take a taxi to work, and you might not reach work because other people will waylay you. In politics, it takes other dimensions, which we know. But I think we are alive to the fact that we will obviously take the appropriate measures. But my hope and expectations of this platform is that part of what is going to come out of it is the deepening of the notion and the ideas of democracy. We are about deepening democracy. We are exercising a fundamental right in the Constitution. We are not stepping on anybody's toes. We have the right, we have the agency to want to have change. And if those people on the other side don't understand the game that they signed up for in 1994, then we have a serious problem. But to that extent, we know that there are people who are democratically illiterate, and we'll be alive to the fact that they'll all get up to various things. But, it wouldn't bother us because we believe in the mission that we have, and we think that we just need to keep to our mission. We need to keep to our values. We need to make sure that you, the people, would be part of our protection. We will do things that will not put us against you. So in the end, it is them versus the people. So we are on the side of the people. That's our choice.
Certainly. Thank you, Ndate Murphy. And is there any questions as I close up the round of questioning? All right. Can I? Okay. All right. Zianda, are you specifically? Just 1 second, please. About the reach of the party, yes. Yes. About, about other parties. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
So, Roger, I'll still give you an opportunity to speak to that one before I hand over to a second round of questioning.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Zianda.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's widely accepted that you can't build the future without young people. And young people in particular are feeling that they're not seen, excluded, unemployed. I don't need to restate the problem to you. So it goes without saying that as change starts now, the interventions that we'd like to make, or we're planning to make, will have to be centered on how to draw young people into our economy and into leadership roles. Okay, and I'll give you I gave this example. One of my engagements in December was to be on the MacG podcast, and I made this point. So we weren't entirely absent, we were busy, okay. If you're a young graduate, and I'm using one example to make a bigger point. Many young graduates try and sometimes get learnerships, okay, in companies. And then say there's 100 who get the learnership, and at the end of the year, depending on that company's prospects, they'll absorb 20 or 30 or 50, okay? Part of a strategy to include young people is to make sure that we have a proper growth strategy in this country so that young people can fulfill their potential and not be at home unemployed graduates or otherwise. So young people, for any party or any initiative, has to be a central theme, which it is for us. Rise Mzansi is a movement that has certainly animated a lot of people's attention. Our view, and I alluded to this in my speech, was, this isn't, what we're trying to do here isn't about joining something. We're trying to craft a vision and an agenda for the country. A collaboration with Rise Mzansi down the line is not something that one should rule out. I think one thing that we are focusing on, we feel that this election requires an urgent intervention. And we are focused on how we can move the needle for the election that's coming up. And so our focal point tends to be quite narrower. In 5 years' time, we will have a very different conversation if we have more of the same. And some parties correctly view what they're doing as a long-term play, etc. We're very focused on what can we do to shape things going into this election. If I could just narrow it down to something as simple as that. I think those were your... Was there another one?
Yes. I mean, you're taking on the ANC, which has a well-oiled...
Okay, right. Yeah.
How it will reach all corners of the country, especially if now you just said now.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just said that your focus is going into this election, which means you need to have a wide reach.
Yes. Thank you. So, and this should appeal to young people. I mean, there's a political paradigm that you set up a party, you set up branches, you get branch members, you collect fees, you have a meeting, you have a policy conference, and that's sort of the linear route. Modern politics does not have to work that way. So we have reached out, and interestingly, well, pleasantly for us, people across this country have reached out to us. And so we have volunteers and people across the length and breadth of this country who are ready to work with us. We will be having some pretty large events in the rest of the country in February. We will notify you of them. So we'll have a national footprint, but we are predicated on getting directly to the citizen through a range of platforms. Social media, word of mouth, small groups. So it's multiple stimuli. And from the data we're getting back with the things we've done to date, a lot of people are seeing our message across this country. We have very carefully analyzed the voting landscape, and we know exactly where we need to be and how to engage with people. We've talked to lots of people about what's on their minds, because it's very important, I think, for a government to hear what people are thinking, not to tell people what they think they need. And so that's been our approach. And so getting to the people across this country is not something that concerns us. I guess I would encourage everyone who looks at us to look at us through a different lens. This isn't a conventional old style branch NEC policy, etc. This is urgent, and we're a very modern political formation, and we're going about it in that way. And we think South Africa is ready for that approach.
Thank you, Roger. Mark, I saw that you'd like to just add to that as well before I hand over
Just
to them.
a little bit to answer the question of a colleague from News 24, to add what Murphy said. You asked what have we learned since December last year. I think one of the most important things that we've learned is that people are still looking for alternatives that they can trust and that they can believe in. Even though there's a small explosion of political parties, and even though there's some very big political parties which, as you say, have money and well-oiled machines and so on, people are not satisfied. People are restless. And people are tired of promises, so they're looking for something that is beyond that. And that is what we are aiming, not just hoping, but planning to provide. And it links to Zianda's question, why trust? That's the big question for me. What's your draw card? Well, I think that people will come to trust us because of the values that we espouse about politics. We keep on saying we want solutions politics. We don't want politics where politics is a constant game by political parties to gain power so that they can then divide power amongst their followers, give tenders out, get people into various places and not solve the problems that face the country. So trust on the basis of a new set of values that start to emerge around politics. Roger mentioned the term servant leadership. Genuine servant leadership. Look at the people who you will see in months ahead who become part of Change Start Now and say, are they servant leaders? Are they people who have served this country without blemish, without corruption, and so on? Look for the game-changing ideas that will make people think, this is what is missing. And look for the critical issues about how we resolve issues of governance. Because again, as Roger said, we have policies, we have law, we have a multitude of solutions. There's nothing, we have the resources that we need in this country, even though people don't have enough resources. We're a relatively rich country, but everything breaks down at the level of governance, at the level of the way politics is played out and political parties relate to each other. That's the nut that has to be cracked if this country is to find a way forward.
And it is 30 years since the advent of democracy. It's an opportunity for us to really seriously think of what needs to change, because there are things that we can't continue doing in the same old way. And this, to me, also includes a real serious appraisal of the structure of government in this country. I know it raises a constitutional issue, but the fact that we have 3 layers, national, provincial, and local government, and if you talk to people at all of those levels, especially at local government level, you then have a very clear understanding of how the province as a structure becomes some kind of a filtering mechanism, so that by the time resources get to where they're supposed to, there are hardly a semblance of what is required to get that sector of municipality working, because that's where delivery actually happens and all of what governance projects, government commitment is about. And so there is a serious need to do a reappraisal of this. I know it's very difficult because vested interests are already ensconced, but in fact, nothing should be beyond reach for review in order to improve the possibility of getting the country out of the rut that we are in.
Okay. Thank you, Ndade Murphy. I'm going to limit it to 2 questions and I will need to wrap it up. I did note that there was a hand from the last round. Thank you so much. Yes, Ndade?
Hello, everyone. My name is Aslam Dasu. Those are my peeps. I'm part of Change Starts Now. I'll just make 2 points to add to what Roger and Murphy said. Yes, this question comes up all the time. You're late. There's not much time. You're new. We know that. But we also know that there's a whole groundswell among everybody outside of the ANC who want to affect change in the country. We also know that there are established political parties who are beginning to converge. We've heard about the great moonshot pact that the DA has spoken about. And when you think about it, our insurgent campaign will get us somewhere by the time of the elections, but perhaps not enough to get us over the line as a single party to take the majority. We understand that. We will work, we will collaborate, we will aggregate over the next few months all of those who believe in how we want to lead this country to join in one very large alliance to win a multi-party approach to our country. That's the first thing. What my colleague Murphy spoke about was about changing the way we are governed. In Parliament, supposed to be the People's Parliament has become a political party parliament. It's a terrible side effect of our proportional representation electoral system, where parties lock Parliament up, concerned only with their interests. So nothing comes from the people into the People's Parliament to direct the executive to deal with their issues. And when you see civil society as it grows, as it's so diverse, so expert, so forward-thinking with great ideas, it hits a brick wall. We are saying to everyone in civil society, and Mark can talk eloquently about this, that in fact, Change Starts Now is a platform for them. Bring your agendas. Most likely, that agenda coincides with ours. Put it on our platform, put your people on our platform, and when the election happens, there will be a pathway for them into Parliament to carry those issues through. So collaboration through aggregation. That's going to be the watchword for the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aslam. And I really like the head. I think it suits me better. Yeah, thanks. I'm going to hand over to you, sir, as our last question for the day. Okay, just 1 second, please. Yeah.
Oh,
just introduce yourself, please, and then your question.
My name is Musampele from Soweto Jabulani. Mina ngifuna ukushiya ngesizulu so that you don't miss an audience.
No problem. Khuluma baba.
Mina ngifuna ukubuza kabanzi namhlanje siyazi ukuthi sibonile ama results wamatekolotsheni we-IEB of which bathole 98.46 or it's 98.46%, and from lapho uyabona ukuthi kune challenge enkulu between abantu abakhonayo nabangakhoni ngoba siyazi ukuthi kusasa it's going to be ama results azophuma kulanka abantwana ababhale umatric not using i-IEB but ababhale umatric the government public schools, yes. So bengifuna ukwazi kabanzi ukuthi as Change Starts Now, how are you going to close the gap between the most privileged nalabo abaswele kakhulu emphakathini esiphila kuwona? And enye into futhi engifuna ukubuza kabanzi ngayo ukuthi last year eGauteng I think there's 62 non-government organizations abawabiza ngokuthi ama drop-in centers that were providing ama meals for abantwana after schools. So as Change Starts Now, noting ukuthi ugovernment waseGauteng uyivalile leyo department leyo beyenza kanjalo. Change Start Now uthini kulabantwana laba after school abaneke babe ne meal guaranteed today? We know ukuthi njengoba kuvuliwe ikolo aneke basabe nama meal. Nina as Change Starts Now, what are you saying to these 62 organizations lankavaliwe? which I believe ukuthi bewafeed ama families of 100,000s, and I believe ukuthi it is a huge market for iChange Start now to showcase ukuthi thina so uhulumeni ozayo sithembisa ukuthi singavala kangaka. So those are my, the last one, I think ningakhohlwa abantu bamasiko, like the arts and culture side of things, because you have young people who are very exposed to that, but the opportunities are very limited. So now kubo nikhuluma as Change Start now, nikhuluma nithini kubo namhlanje ngoba mshona ubalalela. Thank you.
Ngiyabonga Putmusa. You said uPutmusa ne? Yebo, ngiyabonga kakhulu. So yeah. Dade Murphy, can I ask you, I think the three things that he really drew out, and I'm sure you heard. One being, how do we close the gap between private, IEB, and public school education system that currently exists? And then what do we say about the 62 organizations whose resources were recently cut off by the government? We say Gauteng government. Obviously, there's a huge gap now. And what does Change Starts now say about partnering with them? And also, let's not forget those young people that are doing extraordinary things in the arts and culture sector. What do we have to offer them?
Thank you. Yabona ubuza ngesizulu. Fortunately, there's a Zulu in the house. Yeah, so I think the issue of education, the whole issue about IEB versus national certificate, it's an age-old issue, you know, and even from the 70s when I was in the student movement, then that issue was there, but it was quite clear about what causes the differential. It had less to do with the IEB process, but more to do with the deficit that was imposed by the apartheid government on education for black children. Post-94, one would hope that we can evolve towards a situation where equity can be real rather than be stated. And sometimes the dichotomies are false, because I know the issues about, I heard today on the radio, there was conversations about the exams. I think Panyaza saying that it must be revised, this whole IEB system. And people are not happy because it seems like, you know, this is another attempt to solve to the lowest common denominator, you know, rather than to actually ask the question, what is wrong with the system? What must be done to fix it? Because the IEB is not a foreign exam. It is a South African experience that produces certain levels of outputs that in fact are worth emulating. So what is difficult with that? So that if you take a more open, progressive approach, it is a conversation between the big public sector education and those parts of South Africa that are doing exceptionally well. That's why even in business you talk about public-private partnership, because it's the realization that there is compatibility that we can find if we really talk about this in a realistic way, rather than to make it an emotive issue, rather than a practical thing that needs to be considered and solved for. That's really the thing here. So the question about arts and culture, I'm in some WhatsApp groups where with a lot of cultural activists, etc. One of the big challenges is that there's a certain way in which when people talk about STEM subjects in education, sometimes it gets spoken about in such a way that it seems to discount the importance of the arts and culture aspect of education and social development. And I believe, and certainly we'll, in looking at it from Change Starts Now, we will be looking at it not from the point of view of either or, but there has to be a very deep understanding of why, especially in the South African context where we've got the differentials of society and the wealth of cultural and social inputs that will come for that can feed into the education system. So it's not a binary thing. So we need to find a way of inculcating that into education. You know, when you do science, it is important also to do arts, because the brain is a very complex thing. It can't just work on numbers. It needs to be fed on that part of the brain that speaks to character, that speaks to the emotion, that speaks to values, etc. So we need to get that balance right.
Thank you, Ntate Murphy. And thank you to everybody.
Oh, sorry. The food issue, maybe I'll ask Mark. I think Mark has better insights on that. I've been involved in a program called Program to Improve Learning Outcomes in Schools in KwaZulu-Natal for 7 years, from 2013 to 2020. That issue has been huge, and I've been quite alive to the importance of feeding for our children, and that a government has to understand that its role is to empower civil society communities to have the capacity to reach to those corners of the system. I call, when you're driving, you call it the blind spots. In those blind spots reside some of the most vulnerable who go to school hungry, but they need that. In fact, any health economist or health expert will tell you about the importance of a well-fed child and the attention span at school. But maybe, Mark, you can make some comments as well.
Yeah, just to say that because we're in Gauteng and you're asking a question about feeding schemes and food kitchens and so on in Gauteng, it's another example of bad governance and not recognizing where need is most desperate. What we've seen in this province, last year in particular, was the provincial government taking money away from social services, from NGOs, from old age homes, from food kitchens, from gender-based violence shelters. And instead putting money, they took 1.5 billion rand and put it into Panyaza's pet project, the Ama Panyaza. 6,000 poorly trained people who are meant to be dealing with violent crime in our communities. It's a lack of priority. And what we need instead, as Murphy has said, is a seamless way of working between government and people working in communities to make sure that the nutritional needs of all children are met, and are met systematically. A fact of shame of our country is that 27.5% of all children by the age of 5 are stunted. They're malnourished because they don't have enough food. That stunting that occurs by the age of 5 is not something you can cure by feeding a child better when they're 8 and 9 and 10. They live with it throughout their whole lives. It causes the development of obesity. It prevents the development, intellectual development, full intellectual development, people achieving their full potential. We are allowing that to happen. We have a national school nutrition program where when the school holidays come, the school nutrition program stops. So the children who often depend for their one not particularly decent but substantial meal a day then have a prospect of no meal a day over the school holidays. But they're not meant to stop thinking or breathing or studying or learning during school holidays. And this again is an area where if we just used imagination, if we just deployed our resources effectively, it does not need to be like that.
Can I just add one thing to what Marcus said? I actually got to accompany Roger and Moy on some of the school visits yesterday. And one of the schools we visited, first day of school, no delivery of instant oats. So those children going into school didn't have their morning meal. We went to another school and facing in an area that is mired in high levels of poverty and unemployment. And we were presented with this astounding scene. At the edges of the school, there was this incredible vegetable and fruit garden that had been created by the educators and the parents together. And it was intended to supplement the meals of the children to ensure that they had access to fresh fruit and vegetables. Families of those most vulnerable were given access to take what they need, and at the end of every term, the school provided the most vulnerable learners with boxes of produce to ensure that they had food to eat during the holidays. And I thought that that was a representation of South Africa in miniature, because despite the punishing and devastating circumstances, despite the fact that they have been let down, here were South Africans who had made a plan. And I think for us, we want to use that kind of shared ingenuity and resilience and generosity that was so evident in that community and respond to it.
Absolutely. That visit yesterday was so exciting, and thank you for sharing that, Nicole. I want to thank everybody that's here today. Thank you for your frankness, thank you for your robustness, and most importantly, thank you for opening your mind and allowing yourselves and us to think about how do we reimagine our country. I think it was Aslam earlier that said, how do we collaborate, how do we work, how do we aggregate? These are the most urgent questions of what Change Starts Now is bringing to the table. And we want to work with you, we want to partner with you. Right at the front part of our brochure is more information about how you can join the movement. And the one part for me, as a young, black, exciting, and full of life person, I just want to tell you, I relate to this party because of the verb. I mean, look at our offering and look at the verbs that we start with. We want to fix the economy. We want to make our country a safer place. We want to provide a safety net for people who do not have income security. We want to ensure decent basic services such as health, education, water, power, sanitation. And the most exciting verb for me is building a government that works for people. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All say, change. And so
Change.
say all.
In the words of Sam Cooke, change starts now. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon. Just to wrap things up, you're welcome to please join us on my left hand. It's a bit of a walk, but you're welcome to having snacks and some refreshments before we leave. Thank you so much.